In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
We tend to think that a good night's sleep is a luxury that is only available in the modern world. Soft mattresses, warm blankets, silence and darkness. Everything you need to get a good night's sleep. But there is a theory that medieval peasants slept much better than we do. It sounds unbelievable. How can you sleep well when your bed is a pile of straw and animals are grunting behind the wall? But this is not just speculation. Scientists who study the history of sleep talk about a completely different approach to rest. They slept on straw and next to animals, but woke up more refreshed than we do. Today, we will dive into the world of medieval sleep and figure out why our modern sleep may be worse than that of those who lived many centuries ago. We will talk about biphasic sleep, biological rhythms, and how light has changed our lives. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the habits of our ancestors can help us regain healthy and sound sleep. Modern people think that sleep should be continuous, but in fact, this approach is a relatively new phenomenon. In the Middle Ages, people slept differently. Their sleep was divided into two parts, and this phenomenon was called biphasic sleep. People went to bed when the sun went down. They slept for about 4 to 5 hours and then woke up. This period was called first sleep. After waking up, they spent 1 or 2 hours awake. During this time, they did household chores, socialized, read, or simply reflected. Then they went back to sleep, and this period was called second sleep, which also lasted about 4 to 5 hours until dawn. This practice was widespread and is mentioned in letters, diaries, and literary works of the time. This regime was dictated not only by the absence of electric light, but also by natural biological rhythms that were synchronized with the cycle of day and night. Two-phase sleep was so common that it was considered the norm. Historical documents show that this regime was characteristic of all strata of society, from peasants to the nobility. At the same time, it had its own peculiarities. Waking up between the two phases of sleep was not accidental. It coincided with the so-called night silence, when all physical work stopped and there were no distractions. It was a time when one could devote oneself to reflection or communication. In rural communities, people could do small household chores, check the hearth, or just sit in silence. It was a full-fledged, albeit short, break in the day. Many historians believe that this was not just a forced regime, but the optimal state for the human body. During this time, the nervous system was rebooted, allowing it to prepare for the next phase of sleep. The absence of artificial light, city noise, and constant information overload allowed the body to completely relax. The level of the stress hormone cortisol decreased, while the sleep hormone melatonin increased, leading to natural awakening and then to falling asleep again. It was complete harmony with natural rhythms. Evidence of this type of sleep can even be found in medieval medical texts. Doctors at that time believed that waking up at night was normal and even advised patients to use this time for reflection and recovery. They did not see this as a problem or a sign of insomnia, as is common today. For them, sleep was a process that was naturally divided into parts, rather than occurring in one long period. Today, we try to squeeze all our sleep into one continuous phase, which often leads to stress and problems. We struggle with waking up at night, considering it a sign of ill health. But in fact, it may simply be a natural response of our body, which has not had time to adapt to new conditions. It is possible that by trying to sleep through the night, we are going against our own nature, which for millennia has been tuned to two-phase sleep. What if the habit of sleeping through the night is not a sign of health, but a result of living in unnatural conditions? Share your thoughts in the comments. The main reason for biphasic sleep was the lack of artificial lighting. When the sun went down, it was pitch dark. The only sources of light were the fire in the hearth, candles, or oil lamps, which were expensive and did not provide much light. This meant that people went to bed early because they simply could not do anything else. Their bodies were completely synchronized with natural biological rhythms. When darkness fell, melatonin, a hormone that induces sleep, began to be produced. A few hours after falling asleep, melatonin levels dropped and people woke up naturally. At this time, they went about their business. And then, when melatonin levels rose again, they fell asleep again. This was a natural state of the body that was not disturbed by bright light. The absence of light was a key factor in determining the entire daily routine. At dusk, all work outside the home ceased. Inside, people could use candles, but they were very expensive, so they were only lit when necessary. In most cases, after sunset, the only source of light was the hearth, which gave off very little light, and it was impossible to do anything other than talk or perform simple household chores. Another important factor was agricultural life. Peasants lived in close connection with nature and its cycles. Their work began with the first rays of the sun and ended with its setting. This dictated their sleep and wakefulness patterns. The body got used to this schedule and did not need alarm clocks to wake up. The sun itself was their alarm clock. All this created conditions in which the natural rhythms of humans were not disturbed. Our bodies have so-called circadian rhythms that regulate sleep and wakefulness. These rhythms depend on light. When our eyes detect light, the brain suppresses the production of melatonin, and we feel alert. Conversely, when it gets dark, melatonin production increases and we want to sleep. In the Middle Ages, this mechanism worked flawlessly. Sleep was not only rest, but also a time for reflection. Waking up in the middle of the night was when the brain was most active. People used this time for meditation, prayer, or simply to think about their lives. It was a unique period when a person could be alone with their thoughts without distractions. It was a time when the world stood still. The streets were deserted, and the houses were quiet. This allowed people to truly relax and recharge. They did not feel the pressure that we are familiar with today. The pressure to get everything done in one day, work late, watch TV shows, and socialize on social media. Their lives were more measured and peaceful, and this directly affected the quality of their sleep. What if, by trying to cheat our biological rhythms, we are simply preventing ourselves from living fully? What if every swipe on our phone, every night spent watching TV series, is stealing a piece of the true deep rest that was so familiar to our ancestors? To find out how they used this time, watch the video to the end.
And then
The interval between the first and second sleep was not just a time when people were awake. It was a full period of wakefulness that had its own characteristics. During this time, people did not work, as it was impossible in the dark. They spent this time in silence and peace. They could quietly talk to each other, tell stories, or just sit by the hearth. Some used this time for prayer or reflection.
It's late. We must talk.
This period was called waking from sleep or intersleep wakefulness. It was so common that it was mentioned in literature. For example, in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, there is a mention of how people wake up at night to chat and then fall asleep again. This was not a sign of insomnia, but part of the normal sleep cycle. At this time, when the outside world stood still, people found time for personal matters that were impossible to do during the day. Farmers could repair tools or prepare food for the next day without being distracted by daytime chores. Noblemen could retreat to read or write by candlelight. This period was a kind of inner time when one could be alone with one's thoughts. Historians note that it was during this time that people could engage in what we now call creativity and reflection. The absence of distractions and complete silence created ideal conditions for deep reflection. It was a time for meditation, prayer, and planning. Some even believed that it was during this period that their best ideas came to them. Intersleep wakefulness also played an important role in social relationships. In large families or communities, it was a time for quiet communication. People could tell each other stories, share news, or simply sit together by the hearth. It was a time when social hierarchies weakened and people felt closer to each other. This period strengthened family and community ties. Some historical sources mention that people used this time to take care of the house, for example, to light a fire in the hearth to keep warm. This was especially important during the cold season. It was also a time when you could check if everything was in order in the house without disturbing other family members. Sleep in the Middle Ages was not only a physiological process, but also part of culture and everyday life. Its structure was closely linked to the rhythms of nature and social life. People did not consider interrupted sleep to be a problem. On the contrary, they used it for their own needs. And this was only possible because their lives were free from the constant stimulation and information noise that are so characteristic of our time. This sleep pattern was so familiar that people felt uncomfortable when it was disrupted. Insomnia was not as common as it is today because people did not try to go against their nature. They lived in harmony with natural rhythms, which allowed them to have better quality and more restful sleep. And perhaps this was the key to their vitality and endurance. Medieval peasants slept on simple beds, which were usually made of straw or hay. Sometimes they were covered with woolen blankets or skins. It sounds uncomfortable to us, but it was quite functional. Straw retained heat well and prevented the body from coming into contact with the cold floor. Of course, it was not a soft mattress, but it provided the necessary comfort. Beds were usually located in common rooms where the whole family slept. The warmth of their bodies helped maintain the temperature in the room. Straw mattresses were the most common type of bed. They were filled with fresh straw or hay, which was changed several times a year, usually after the harvest. Straw had excellent thermal insulation properties and absorbed moisture well, which helped to keep the bed dry and warm. Although it may seem uncomfortable at first glance, straw molded to the contours of the body, creating a kind of orthopedic support. Simple linen or woolen cloths could be placed on top of such a mattress, and blankets woven from coarse wool or fur skins were used for warmth. The latter, especially sheepskin, were an excellent means of retaining heat. Beds, as we understand them, did not always exist. People often slept directly on the floor, laying their mattresses on stone or earthen surfaces. To protect themselves from the cold, they could make a low wooden platform that separated them from the ground. Sleeping together was common. All family members could sleep in one large room, and in wealthy homes, servants could sleep there too. This was not only a social custom, but also a necessity. The more bodies in the room, the higher the temperature. Unlike modern bedrooms, where we sleep alone, the medieval bedroom was the center of life. There was no privacy. People were used to their sleep not being completely private. The noise, conversations, and movements of other people were part of their daily lives. This may have contributed to their sleep being more superficial, but at the same time more sensitive to external factors, which was important for safety. Even noble people, despite their luxury and soft mattresses, did not always sleep in privacy. Their rooms were large and cold, so servants often slept next to them. This was a practical solution that helped to keep the room warm and ensure safety. Thus, the bed was not just a place to sleep, but a functional tool for survival. It was part of an ecosystem in which each element worked for the benefit of the entire community. There were no individual needs for comfort that we value so much today. There was only one common goal: to survive and preserve oneself. But how, pray tell, could you sleep when you were lying on a straw and your body was living according to its own incomprehensible laws? Let's take a look at how biological rhythms help them get enough sleep even in such conditions. Modern science confirms that our bodies are tuned to the cycles of day and night. We are programmed to sleep in the dark and stay awake in the light. In the Middle Ages, people lived in complete harmony with these rhythms. They had no alarm clocks or artificial light to disrupt their biological clocks. Their bodies worked as a single mechanism that adjusted to sunrise and sunset. This allowed them to wake up feeling refreshed, without the feeling of exhaustion that many of us are familiar with. Our circadian rhythms are internal biological clocks that regulate many processes in the body, including the sleep-wake cycle. They synchronize with the external environment, primarily with sunlight. In the Middle Ages, this mechanism worked flawlessly. People woke up with the first rays of the sun and went to bed when it set. It was a natural state that was not disturbed by any external factors. The absence of artificial light was crucial. In complete darkness, the brain received a signal that night had fallen and began to actively produce melatonin, a hormone that induces sleep. A few hours later, when melatonin levels dropped, people woke up, and this was part of their natural cycle. They did not struggle with waking up, but took it for granted. That is why their sleep was deeper and more restful. Unlike us, medieval peasants did not experience information overload. Their brains were not occupied with a constant stream of news, social media, and entertainment. This allowed their nervous system to completely relax and recover during sleep. They did not struggle with thoughts about the past day or upcoming tasks. Their lives were more measured, and this directly affected the quality of their rest. Sleep was not just a physiological need for them, but part of their life cycle. They lived in complete harmony with nature, and their bodies were attuned to its rhythms. They did not need to force themselves to sleep or stay awake. Everything happened naturally. Moreover, the physical labor that peasants engage in contributed to deep sleep. Hard work in the fresh air tired the body, which helped them fall asleep faster and more soundly. Today, many of us lead sedentary lifestyles, which can negatively affect the quality of our sleep. Thus, the key to good sleep for medieval peasants was their lifestyle. They lived in harmony with nature, their bodies were not overloaded with information, and their physical labor helped them relax. All these factors together created the ideal conditions for a good night's sleep, which we may be lacking today. It would seem that nobles who lived in luxury should have slept better than peasants, but this was not the case. Their beds were softer, but their sleep was just as fitful. Castles were cold, and they often woke up at night to throw more wood on the fire. In addition, the nobility had more social events that could last late into the night. Peasants' sleep was more regular and deeper. They went to bed early because they had to get up early to work in the fields. Their lives were closely connected to nature, which allowed them to sleep in accordance with their biological rhythms. The sleep of the nobility, despite the outward luxury, was full of discomfort and anxiety. The castles in which they lived were huge and cold, which made sleeping a real challenge. Even with fireplaces, the temperature in the chambers rarely rose to a comfortable level, and at night they had to wake up to light the fire or throw on more wood. This was necessary to maintain warmth. The nobility had more social obligations. Parties, balls, and receptions could last late into the night, disrupting their natural rhythms. Unlike peasants who went to bed at sunset, the nobility could stay awake until midnight and then, waking up in the middle of the night, fall asleep again. As a result, their sleep was not as regular and deep as that of the peasants. Peasants' sleep was more regular and deep. Their lives were subject to the cycle of agricultural work. They went to bed early so they could wake up at dawn and go to the fields. Their bodies were synchronized with natural rhythms, and they did not need alarm clocks. Hard physical labor helped them fall asleep quickly and sleep deeply. They did not have to worry about social events, and their lives were more measured. Another factor affecting the sleep of the nobility was stress. Managing an estate, participating in wars, political intrigues, all this created constant tension. This stress could lead to insomnia and interrupted sleep. Peasants, although they lived in more difficult conditions, did not experience such social and political pressure. It is also worth noting that castles were often noisy places. Servants, guests, guards. All of this created constant background noise that could interfere with sleep. Peasants, on the other hand, lived in quieter surroundings where their sleep was not disturbed by external sounds. Thus, despite soft beds and luxury, the nobility slept worse than peasants. Their lives, filled with stress and social obligations, disrupted their natural body rhythms, leading to interrupted and shallow sleep. Why do you think even rich people were unable to achieve uninterrupted sleep? Let's talk about it now. Don't switch channels. The invention of electric light completely changed our lives, including our sleep. We can stay awake around the clock, work at night, and watch movies until morning. But our bodies have not had time to adapt to such changes. Bright light from screens and lamps suppresses melatonin production, leading to insomnia. Our sleep has become shorter and less restful. We fight it with coffee and energy drinks. But this only exacerbates the problem. Before the advent of electricity, human life was synchronized with sunlight. People went to bed when the sun went down and woke up with its first rays. This cycle was so natural that disrupting it led to health problems. Artificial light completely destroyed this harmony. It has allowed us to work and entertain ourselves around the clock, which has led to us sleeping less. The average amount of sleep has decreased by several hours, and this has serious consequences for our health. The bright light from screens, smartphones, and computers that we see before bedtime suppresses the production of melatonin. This hormone is responsible for regulating the sleep-wake cycle. When its production is disrupted, we cannot fall asleep even if we are very tired. This leads to insomnia and other sleep problems. In addition, artificial light disrupts our body's circadian rhythms. Our internal alarm clock gets confused, and we cannot understand when we need to sleep and when we need to be awake. This leads to us feeling tired and exhausted, even if we have slept enough. Modern people try to combat this problem with coffee and energy drinks, but this only exacerbates the situation. They provide a temporary boost of energy, but do not solve the problem. Dependence on these drinks leads to even greater disruption of sleep and wakefulness rhythms. As a result, we end up in a vicious circle. We cannot fall asleep because we have not had enough sleep, and we cannot get enough sleep because we cannot fall asleep. Unlike us, medieval peasants lived in harmony with nature. Their sleep was deeper and more restful. They did not know what insomnia was and woke up feeling refreshed, without feeling exhausted. Their lives were more measured, and this was directly reflected in the quality of their rest. Perhaps we should follow the example of our ancestors and try to return to a more natural lifestyle in order to restore our sleep. Artificial light has made our sleep less restful. Even if we sleep for a sufficient amount of time, our sleep can be superficial and shallow. This is because bright light prevents us from fully relaxing and recovering. As a result, we wake up tired, even if we slept all night. But the problem is not limited to melatonin and circadian rhythms. Artificial light, especially blue light from screens, affects many other biological processes. For example, it can cause eye strain, headaches, and even long-term vision problems. Our eyes are not adapted to constant exposure to such intense light, especially in the dark when the pupil is dilated. This leads to eye muscle strain and blurred vision. Recent studies show that prolonged exposure to artificial light at night may be associated with an increased risk of depression, anxiety disorders, and obesity. When our circadian rhythms are disrupted, the hormones that regulate appetite, such as leptin and ghrelin, are also disrupted. This can lead to overeating and weight gain, creating a new vicious cycle of health problems. To minimize the harm, we must be mindful of our use of light. It is important to limit exposure to bright light, especially blue light, a few hours before bedtime. Many devices today have nightlight modes that reduce blue light, making it warmer and softer. This small change can significantly help prepare the body for rest. Other helpful habits include using blackout curtains to completely block out light from the street and avoiding nightlights or bright lamps in the bedroom. Instead, you can use lamps with dim, red, or amber light, which do not affect melatonin production as much. In addition to the physical effects, artificial light also affects our psychology. We live in a culture where productivity is valued over rest. The 24/7 availability of information, entertainment, and work creates constant pressure, making us feel like we have to be on 24/7. This psychological pressure exacerbates sleep problems, as our brains are constantly in a state of arousal, preventing us from relaxing and falling asleep. Returning to a more natural lifestyle is not just about rejecting technology, but rethinking our relationship with sleep. Sleep is not a luxury, but a necessity of life, just like food and water. Proper, high-quality rest allows us not only to recover physically, but also to strengthen our mental health, increase productivity, and improve our overall quality of life. We need to learn to listen to our bodies and respect their need for darkness and peace. Today, many of us suffer from sleep problems. Insomnia, interrupted sleep, and fatigue are common occurrences. We try to solve these problems with sleeping pills, but this does not always help. Perhaps we should follow the example of our ancestors. Try to avoid bright lights in the evening, go to bed earlier, and don't try to sleep continuously. Perhaps your body will return to its natural rhythm on its own. Insomnia has become a real epidemic of our time. Constant stress, information overload, and an unnatural daily routine prevent our bodies from relaxing and recovering. We try to compensate for this with medication and other means, but they only eliminate the symptoms and do not solve the problem. We have forgotten that sleep is a natural process that does not require external intervention. Sleep problems are directly related to circadian rhythm disruption. Our bodies cannot understand when we need to sleep and when we need to be awake. The bright light from the screens we see in the evening suppresses the production of melatonin, and we cannot fall asleep even if we are very tired. This leads to us going to bed late and waking up tired because our sleep was shallow and incomplete. We can learn from medieval peasants. They lived in complete harmony with nature, and their sleep was deeper and more restful. They did not know what insomnia was and woke up feeling refreshed without feeling exhausted. Their lives were more measured, and this was directly reflected in the quality of their rest. To restore our sleep, we need to go back to basics. Try going to bed earlier when it gets dark outside. Give up using gadgets before bed. Instead, read a book in dim light or just sit in silence. This will allow your body to relax and prepare for sleep. Don't try to sleep continuously. If you wake up in the middle of the night, don't fight it. Get up, walk around the room, drink some water, or just sit in silence. Perhaps your body will return to the two-phase sleep that was so familiar to our ancestors. Most importantly, learn to listen to your body. If you feel tired, don't fight it. Give yourself a rest. Sleep is not a luxury, but a necessity that helps us stay healthy and happy. Our modern world constantly demands that we be on. Work emails arrive at night, social media feeds are updated around the clock, and streaming services offer endless entertainment. This constant access to information and light disrupts our internal clocks, forcing our bodies to work against their natural inclinations. Medieval peasants did not face this pressure. Their day ended with the setting of the sun, and this was a signal for their bodies and minds to rest. For them, the absence of artificial light was a blessing, not a disadvantage. Today, we can deliberately create a similar environment. Install warm, subdued lighting in your bedroom, use curtains that block out street lights, and remove all devices with screens from the room. Creating a kind of sleep cave will help your body understand that it is time to rest. Remember that even the faint light from a charging indicator can disrupt your sleep, so try to minimize any sources of light. Another important aspect is physical activity. Medieval peasants engaged in hard physical labor, which naturally led to fatigue and deep sleep. If you want to improve your sleep, try following some of the principles our ancestors used. This may help you regain healthy and restful sleep. Fall asleep in complete darkness. This is one of the most important principles. In the Middle Ages, there was no electric light and people fell asleep in complete darkness. This allowed their bodies to produce melatonin, a hormone that induces sleep. Today, we are constantly surrounded by bright light from screens, which suppresses melatonin production. To fix this, try to avoid using gadgets an hour before bedtime. Instead, read a book in dim light or listen to calm music. This will allow your body to prepare for sleep. Install curtains that completely block out light so that your sleep is not disturbed by streetlights. Go to bed early. Medieval peasants went to bed at sunset and woke up at sunrise. This was natural. We, on the other hand, try to stay up late. which disrupts our circadian rhythms. Try going to bed an hour or two earlier than usual. This will allow your body to return to its natural rhythm. It may be difficult at first, but over time you will feel that you are waking up refreshed and full of energy. Don't be afraid to wake up at night. It may seem strange, but medieval peasants didn't consider this a problem. They woke up in the middle of the night to do their chores and then went back to sleep. If you wake up at night, don't panic. Don't look at the clock or try to force yourself to sleep. Instead, get up, walk around the room, drink some water, or just sit in silence. Don't turn on bright lights or pick up your phone. Just give your body a chance to return to its natural cycle. Create bedtime rituals. In the Middle Ages, people had rituals that helped them relax and prepare for sleep. These could be evening prayers, quiet conversation, or simply sitting by the hearth. You can create your own rituals too. It could be a warm bath, meditation, or simply reading a book. These rituals will help your body understand that it's time to rest. Give up coffee and alcohol. Coffee and alcohol can negatively affect the quality of your sleep. Caffeine is a stimulant that can interfere with falling asleep, and alcohol, although it causes drowsiness, makes sleep shallow and intermittent. Try to give up these drinks at least a few hours before bedtime. Be more physically active. Medieval peasants did a lot of physical work, which helped them fall asleep quickly. Today, many of us lead sedentary lifestyles. To improve your sleep, try adding more physical activity to your life. This could be walking, going to the gym, or doing yoga. Physical activity helps relieve stress and fatigue, which promotes deeper sleep. We modern people are used to seeing night as something frightening, a time when we need to switch off from life in order to switch on again at dawn.
That would be best.
Medieval peasants did not think so. For them, night was part of the natural cycle, a time for rest, reflection, and even communication. Their sleep was not divided into 8 continuous hours as our ideas require. They slept in 2 stages. The first sleep, which lasted from sunset to midnight, and the second, which began after a short midnight break and ended at dawn. This 2-phase sleep system, or biphasic sleep, was the norm for hundreds of generations. During this nighttime break, farmers did not just toss and turn. They went about their daily business, throwing wood on the fire, checking on their livestock, praying, or even talking to each other. It was a time for intimate, quiet communication when the whole world stood still. This sleep pattern was synchronized with nature. In the absence of electric light and artificial stimuli, their bodies were sensitive to the change from day to night, and the moonlight and stars were their only beacons in the darkness. Of course, their lives were filled with physical labor, which in itself contributed to deep sleep. Fatigue after working in the fields, harvesting crops, or caring for animals served as a powerful, prescription-free sleeping pill. Unlike us, whose brains are constantly in multitasking mode, their minds were free from the stress we experience due to deadlines, social media, and the flow of information. They lived in the moment, and their sleep reflected this simplicity and harmony. Their beds, simple, straw-filled mattresses and woolen blankets, were not luxurious, but they provided enough comfort to restore their strength. Often, the whole family slept together, which provided not only warmth, but also a sense of security. Their sleep was not an isolated, individual act. It was a collective experience that further strengthened family and community ties. We may never be able to fully return to this way of life, but we can learn from it. Lessons about how important it is to listen to your body, how valuable it is to disconnect from information noise, and how beneficial it is for us to live in harmony with natural cycles. After all, the best sleep is not the one that lasts longer, but the one that allows us to feel part of a large, harmonious world where night is not an enemy, but an ally. This unique rhythm of life and sleep was part of a broader ecosystem. Medieval people did not strive for productivity in the sense that we understand it today. Their lives were cyclical, not linear. Work depended on the season, and rest was as important as labor. Unlike us, who are constantly striving to achieve and do, medieval peasants found satisfaction in the very process of living. Their sleep was not just a break, but an integral part of that process. This natural rhythm helped them cope with the challenges of their era. When night fell, it was time to restore not only physical strength, but also mental peace. The absence of artificial lighting meant that the body could produce melatonin, the sleep hormone, in the right amounts without interference. Modern blue screens on phones, computers, and televisions suppress melatonin production, leading to insomnia and poor sleep quality. Social connections also played a huge role. The whole village worked and rested at the same pace. At night in the silence, there were no distractions except the sounds of nature. This allowed the brain to truly relax and enter the deep sleep phases that are so important for memory restoration and consolidation. No one experienced FOMO, fear of missing out, because there was nothing to miss. Everyone was together in their own rhythm. Today we can try to recreate these conditions, at least partially. Give up gadgets an hour before bedtime, create a dark and quiet space in the bedroom, spend more time outdoors. These simple steps can help us reconnect with our own natural rhythms and perhaps get closer to the peace and depth of sleep that was so familiar to people in the Middle Ages. Their healthy sleep was not just a lucky coincidence, but a direct result of a lifestyle that was completely in tune with human nature. Their relationship with the night was free of fear and anxiety. Night was not a time for worrying about tomorrow or endlessly analyzing the past. It was a time for silence, contemplation, and inner work. In the absence of constant external stimulation, their minds were free to wander, processing the information of the day and preparing for the next. It was a kind of reset that we try to simulate today through meditation and other practices. Peasants did not need sleep apps or smart alarm clocks. Their bodies and minds were perfectly tuned to the natural clock. Their sleep was organic, not artificially regulated, and therein lies its main advantage. It was a state of complete trust in the world, which continued to move through its cycles, regardless of human concerns. Thus, sleep in the Middle Ages was not at all what we imagined it to be. It was deep and regular, despite all the everyday inconveniences. This was possible because people lived in harmony with nature and their biological rhythms. Do you think it is possible to return to this way of life today in order to improve your sleep? Write your answer in the comments. If you have ideas for future videos, please write to us. We are always looking for new topics and stories to tell you about. We are interested in everything from everyday life in ancient Rome to the daily life of the Vikings.